Ulang iso. Mute over here, okay?
Okay.
Johnny Craig, candidate for our VP for Student Affairs. Welcome to Heathrow, Altamont, and the Lee campus at Oviedo that's being live streamed to them. So everybody say hi to our colleagues over there.
Hello.
Want to remind you, those of you here in the room in Sanford and those of you in the Altamont, Heathrow, and Lee campus rooms, you have hard copy paper forms to fill out for evaluation. In Sanford, Brittany will pick them up. In Heathrow, Mark is picking them up. Altamont is Patty, and at the Lee campus is Maggie. So as you fill those out, look to give those forms to those members of IER. Those of you that are watching the video online and are not in one of the rooms, please fill out the evaluation at the web address that May sent out in the original email. And I'll remind you of that again at the end of the talk. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Johnny Craig from Milwaukee Community Technical College. And he is here he's going to introduce himself. That's the first question I posed to him. And then after that, we're going to open it up to your questions. Oviedo, Lee campus, Altamont, and Heathrow, you have a person stationed in the room with a phone number. And Barbara LeBranch will be on the other end, and she will take your questions. So call ahead. Okay. Mr. Craig.
Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me okay? All the outlying campuses as well. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Johnny Craig. I'm a candidate for Vice President of Student Affairs here at Seminole State. I'm excited to be actually in warmer weather today. But I come to you from Milwaukee Area Technical College, where I serve as currently the Vice President of Student Services and Enrollment Management. And so I won't have a lot of background about who I am. I really want to get to you guys' questions, but just to give you an idea, I'm a native Floridian. I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida. I did my Bachelor's of Science in Business and Agribusiness from Florida A&M University and a Bachelor's of Science in Economics from Florida A&M University. I have a Juris Doctorate from Florida State University and a Master's of Higher Ed Administration from Georgia State University. For the past 4 years, I've served as a Chief Student Affairs Officer, 2 years at City College of Chicago, where I was the Dean of Student Affairs and the Chief Student Affairs Officer there, and currently 2 years, well, it'll be 2 years next week, actually, at Milwaukee Area Technical College, where I serve as the Vice President of Student Services and Enrollment Management. And so within that period of time, I've had an opportunity to supervise various areas of student services, work with enrollment plans, work with our students. That's important, work with our teams to help grow. And so I've worked in the system. I worked at Tallahassee Community College, and I worked at Florida State College at Jacksonville. And 4 years ago, when I left the state to go north to be the dean of Kennedy King, my wife promised that I would consider coming back to warmer weather. But no, actually, I'm looking for the right fit. And where you guys are headed and what I've seen so far, it just excites me. The work that you're doing, you've done in the past, and the work that you're moving forward with under Dr. Lorenz is exciting. We're currently part of Guided Pathways, my current institution, 2.0. I'm on the steering committee, one of the leads there, and I understand the difference that really making sure that we're student ready will make for our students, our business partners, and our community. And that's where we focus. So open to questions, but it all starts here. It starts with the front line, it starts with our staff, it starts with our faculty, and how can we work together So if you've seen a little bit about my bio, I believe that it takes student affairs and academic affairs working jointly to have student success. We can't work in silos. Traditionally, we've done that, and that has yielded not great results, right? And so as we build that collaboration, as we have a plan to move that forward, I would love to be a part of that. And so that's a little bit about me. I am married with 4 kids, 2 that are going to college this year. One who's chosen now, I'm happy to say decision days happen. So one's going to the University of Memphis in biomedical engineering, and one's going to Xavier University in biochemistry. And so both are looking to go in the medical field. We'll see how that works. We all deal with nursing majors all the time, right? But we'll see. But honestly, so I'm excited about, as we make the transition with them and they grow, my family looking to make the transition back home, because Florida's home for us. So open the floor for questions.
Okay, who's going to be first? Okay, here you go.
And I walk around a lot, so I hope that's okay.
Just watch to stay in the...
Gotcha, okay.
So my name is Summer Pesator. I am an admissions specialist at the college. Mostly I recruit. So a telltale sign of a great leader is promoting professional growth and excellence from within. Can you tell me about a time when you promoted the upward mobility of employees within your institution?
Yes, I can. Good question. I think I pride myself in being a transformational leader. And when you think about, look at transformational leadership, it's focused on identifying those individual strengths that your team have. Help to develop that strength in those individual team members so you can meet the overall mission of your organization. I'm proud to say that several of my team members who've worked with me at other organizations have moved on to director and even VP roles. And so when you talk about developing a team, it starts there. Team is not just Johnny, okay? It's everyone. And it's identifying what's your goals? What do you want to grow to be? How do you want to grow and develop? How can I support that? That's important. One example would be, I don't want to call the name, but he's currently a VP. And he was my AVP at one of my prior institutions. And so he had a desire to be a VP, so we provided some leadership training, some coaching, some support. And I'm happy to say now 6 months later, he's a VP at an institution. And so I believe in that. As we go through change management, understand that change in guided pathways, if you guys go that route, will be some change. It's hard, but building, developing your team is key, especially your frontline staff, especially your faculty, those that are interacting with those students on a day-to-day basis, so they understand that there is a trajectory for me here at the institution, and that trajectory, you're going to support that. So I have several examples of that, but we can speak more.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Coming over.
Hi, we met earlier.
Yes.
I'm Cheryl Sakati. You talked about silos, and could you give some examples where you increase the collaboration between student affairs and academic affairs?
Yes, I can. Thanks, good question. And I've talked about that a lot throughout the day in several different examples, but let me reference one that I hadn't mentioned earlier. As my institution is going through guided pathways, there are 4 pillars. Okay, it's making sure that you make sure the students get on the path, they stay on the path, and they ensure learning, and they are learning while they're on the path. Okay, you're trying to focus on that. And so one thing we did differently is we looked at our placement. We looked at understanding what students would take, what courses they need to take, and how do we identify and assess that early on. So my institution, we currently use AccuPlacer. Well, we were using AccuPlacer as our placement tool. We're moving to multiple measures. Multiple measures is not something that you can do independently. It's something that everyone needs to be a part of. So we looked at our data first, right? What did our data tell us about students with high school GPAs? What did they tell us about our students that are coming back to college? Did we see any differences between where their AccuPlacer placement rate was and their overall success rates were based on their GPAs? We found GPA to be a stronger predictor for us. It may be different at every institution. Okay, so we put together a work group of student affairs practitioners and academic affairs practitioners to look at all of the aspects around that, moving away from AccuPlacer. The core challenge was identified. We want to move away from AccuPlacer. So the next question is, who needs to be involved in that conversation? And I've shared this earlier. Who's not involved in the conversation? What's our current state and what's our future state? And so we've done that over the last, I would say, 8 months or so. We moved away from AccuPlacer, but we've also worked with our faculty to develop some type of supports for our students. So now we use Alex PPL, and that's another tool that allows our students to get the knowledge base they need. It's a learning module as they go for math, specifically for math, and we can give them the support they need through the process. And so Guided Pathways has allowed us to look at that in so many different ways. When you talk about onboarding, when you look at course delivery, you talk about attendance, you consider multiple modalities, shortening classes. Looking at all, we just recently did credit reduction. Conversations around that has to be on both sides, because if there's not, you may reduce your credits from 69 to 60, but then there's financial aid implications for the student, because now the calculation is based on 60 credits versus 69, and what if they have too many credits and 150% rule kick in? Having those conversations across the silos allow us to really have holistic student development, not just one thing. We want to develop our students academically, career, professionally, and financially, so that when they leave here, they're global citizens and they can meet their needs and support their families. So that's a couple. I have many more examples, but those are a couple. Sure.
Tony has the
Oh, hello.
Hi, Johnny.
Hello.
I'm Tony Maglier from the Grants Office.
Yes.
And I'm sure that you've had the opportunity to familiarize yourself with some of the potentials and some of the challenges that the college is facing. And as a member of the Grants Office, we're always seeking out innovative ideas to help solve some of the challenges the college has. I'm wondering if you could share one or two innovative thoughts that you might have, maybe currently in the literature, that you might want to explore here that we could use for a grant idea?
Yeah. So looking at the data, again, you'll hear me reference that a couple times. Understanding that a number of our students, for instance, our AAS programs, I think they take on average 11 semesters to complete. Okay, that matters. So we're talking about persistence and momentum there. When you look at the concept of 15 to finish and how you're helping students get a little more credit hours to move forward to completing their degree quicker, that's a consideration. Look at our returning adult learners. I think 67% of your students are returning students, the average age about 29. So a lot of those students started college at some point and they stopped out. How can we support that population? Looking at our foster care system, youth aging out of foster care, there's a lot of dollars in support for those populations, and our veterans as well. And so a couple of those different areas we can consider. I'll talk briefly about our, we have an adult promise program. And I mentioned this in a prior group. And that program is focused on a couple things. Helping to re-engage students that stopped out of college at some point. So if you've been out of college 2 years and you're thinking you want to come back to college, we're going to support you financially from an institutional standpoint. And so how do we set that up? Most promise programs, if you're probably familiar, are last dollar. So they make sure the students are Pell eligible, and so whatever you receive in Pell Grant, the gap to it, the promise program or the institution will cover. Adult learners are a little tricky. Right? So some of those adult learners might have used most of their aid. They may be SAP. They may have some type of default going on. So they may not be able to receive promised dollars from our institution if they're Pell eligible. So we structured our program a little differently for those students. First thing, students had to be 24 years old. Why? We want to make sure they're independent, right? We want to make sure they can receive that. Secondly, we wanted an average annual gross income of $56,000 or less. Why? Pell eligibility. It links directly to that. But we didn't require Pell eligibility. We used the AGI to get us at that point. Okay? So by doing that, we were able to re-engage students that had loan default. We were able to re-engage students that might have had a SAP violation to get them back into the conversation. Because once they have the conversation, then we can build a plan. But if you opt them out before the conversation begins, you can't have a plan developed. Next thing we did is that we partnered with our business partners, because it's privately funded, to make sure students that are coming into that program, they have to be enrolled in one of the top 50 careers in our region. That's meeting that middle skills labor gap that our business partners want us to do. And so by doing those things, we were able to re-engage students, and we actually brought back 1,000 students in this fall term, and 970 were here in the spring. Being creative. What was the benefit for the college? We re-engaged over 80% of our former students that stopped out, that we couldn't ever find a way to get them back. Now they're back. Okay, we require the students to take 2 classes, 6 credit hours. Why? Most of our students are part-time, so by having a 6 credit hour requirement versus a full-time requirement, we can help them meet their needs. So how does foundational grants play into that? We had to work with our business partners, our advisory boards, to figure out a way to fund this. Okay, and so by having outcomes that are tied directly to business, we were able to find dollars to help fund this program. And so thinking a little differently, being a little creative, but also engaging all stakeholders is how that helped. That happened. Okay.
Saw another hand over there. Here you go.
Hi, I'm Leanne Davis. I'm the Assistant Director of Dual Enrollment.
Okay.
So can you tell us about your experience working with with K-12 partners?
Yes, yes. So we dual enrollment. We do have dual enrollment. I recently got dual enrollment under me now. It was in the academic side of the house before, but as of October, it moved under to student services. And I advocated for that for a reason, because understanding that we need to link with those students early. We need to show our value proposition to them while they're in high school, so that we can get them to transition to our institutions. And so what we have in Milwaukee is an initiative that's called M Cubed. M Cubed consists of Milwaukee Public Schools, MATC, and University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. We talk together to increase higher education opportunities for our students. And so I co-chair that initiative for the college in a lot of ways. And so I work with my partner for you guys, a direct connect with UCF, and show how we can communicate ourselves together as a transfer opportunity for these students. How we can help the students understand that starting now at dual enrollment is serious. It's not just I'm taking a class because it's here, because this follows you. So how we communicate to the student and the parent is important. So one of our major initiatives as a part of MQ was FAFSA completion. We focused on that because what we found is that students that complete the FAFSA had some type of connectivity to the institution that they chose. And by doing that, we were able to have a communication with those students to have them transition. So dual enrollment serves as that base pipeline in some ways, but also it serves as an opportunity for students to get a little leg up and a more familiarity about the college experience. I was a first generation college student, I always say that, because I didn't know how to do college early on. I struggled, 2.3 for me, 3.5. I struggled, but I was on academic scholarships. My dad was like, hey, you're on scholarship. If you lose this, it's on you because you did what you had to do to get there. And so the decisions you make now make a difference. I took dual enrollment, got 2 C's. So I started off at a 2.0. So I know the importance of communicating, especially to students that don't have family that really understand it, don't really have siblings that can tell them how that works or how this impacts you. So it goes from start to finish. There has to be a formalized communication plan. They should be a part of the recruitment plan that's developed, and they should be engaged throughout the process. Not only the student, but the parents as well. Sure.
Hi, my
Hello.
name is Mallory Pigman. I am a re-enrollment and retention specialist. So you were talking about guided pathways, and one of the things you mentioned was staying on the path.
Yes.
So my question will naturally be about that. What campaigns and or initiatives have you implemented in your current position or previous positions to increase student retention?
Good question. And so I want to add to that and say that retention is part of it, persistence to completion is also part of it. And so a lot of times at college we talk about retaining the student from semester to semester, but that doesn't mean they're on the right path. So when you look at guided pathways in terms of staying on the path, it's not just making sure that they're coming back, but they know they're coming back and taking the right courses at the right time to meet their overall needs. So one example would be we broke our students into buckets. And those buckets allowed us to do different outreach campaigns based on those students. So I'll give an example. When we worked with our veteran student population, having that veterans bucket allowed us to do direct marketing to those students. Geo-targeting, if you're familiar with the concept. And so that concept means when we have our veterans and they're on their social media, they would see, register now, you're veteran students at MATC. Class is open today. Okay, being specific and targeted in our approach to those students made a difference. We actually had a 20% increase in retention by just doing things a little differently and reaching out to our students in a whole different way. I shared earlier, we reduced our marketing budget significantly, but we're up 2.5% in enrollment because we went to different where they are. We didn't just have billboards, right? We partnered with our faculty. We had advisors working in the classroom. We did group registration events. So it's a couple different things you can do. There are a multitude of things you can do for that, but it can't be one thing. But you have to first understand who that population is. And so to go to the persistence piece, typically in higher ed, we're reactive. So we do retention alerts. We do things once it happened. And so moving more to a predictive modeling, predictive analytics is very important. I mentioned that we're looking to use EAB Navigate down the line. And so identifying some of those predictive analytics, that really matters. So now I can give you resources before you know you really need them. I can expose you to those opportunities early on. And that's what we have to do with our students. And once you build that, once you have that built in, it becomes just part of the fabric of the institution. You're not running trying to catch up of what the student what's happening to the student. You're on the front end of that, and you're giving them the tools they need to be successful. So a couple of different ways to look at it, but persistence, I think, and having a clear path is key. Having some understanding early on when you come on the path about your career goal is key. I had a question earlier about that, how you get them connected. It has to be contextualized in a way, whether it's contextualized instruction or contextualized from a student services standpoint, where I understand how is this going to benefit me, especially with the Gen Z population. They're just in time. So how are we going to help those students? But then our faculty, they're saying Gen Z, millennials, and Gen X. You have all of those in the same room. So we have to make sure that we're fluent enough and agile enough in our approaches to retain all those different groups in different ways. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Okay, one more question here, and then we'll take Barbara's question that came from one of our campuses. So, okay, here you go.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
I'm Nicolette Bradley. I'm an educational advisor for the First Generation Freshman Program.
Okay.
You spoke a little bit about your personal experience as a first generation student, but I was wondering if you could expand on that about first generation students, specifically their unique needs and how we can address them with best practices.
What you find early on, being a former first gen and working with first gen students, is they need to learn how to do college. It's not something that you automatically know. You don't automatically know how to communicate with faculty. You don't automatically know how to navigate Canvas or Blackboard. And so early on, some type of orientation, whether it's, and we do a lot of the typical large room orientation, which work, but how do you connect with them in their manner? So we do small videos, we're redoing our website. We're creating videos, we're having peer-to-peer contact, peer-to-peer outreach for those students. Creating affinity groups based on those students' needs, their programs, their desires. Once you build that, now you have a sense of connectivity. And once you have a sense of connectivity, now you can start to make them sticky, is what the word I like to use, where they feel as though I'm connected to the college. And so therefore, if I have a question, I know the resource to go to get that answer. It's not always academic why first gen, or even all regular students don't succeed. A lot of times it goes beyond that. Your SESI data talked about I think it mentioned two things, primarily was work and finances. Those are two of the primary reasons students say, I may stop out of school. So how do we provide wraparound supports to encourage those students, to support those students there? That's important. And so the first gen population, I think, I like to use the concept of the idea that you use in disability, like universal design. So if you can build it for that population that's high risk, you can help everyone. And so building a plan for that, whether it's a pre-college bridge program, which I've done, whether it's a student success class that's mandatory, whether there's a co-rec that's built in about learning how to do college in some way. There's multiple options, but you can't do it, I can't do it just as student affairs professionals, because they see us on the onboarding, they see their faculty 80% of the time in the classroom. So we have to have that conversation with them to make sure we're all on the same page of how we help these students, because they're all our students. Yes.
All right, so we have a couple of questions from the Heathrow campus.
Yes.
A lot of students apply but do not enroll. What would be your approach to look into stop out points and how to overcome them to increase FTEs?
So, good question, Heathrow. That's right up my alley. I love enrollment management. The first thing is, one of the first questions I will ask is, what's our conversion rate? Okay, do we know our conversion? Okay, can we look at our conversion and disaggregate that data to figure out who we're keeping, who we're not, who's moving through the pipeline? And then you have to have a process map for enrollment. And once you do that, you can find out where the stop gaps are, okay, where are we losing those students along the process, and you may have some of that already done. But once you do that, then you develop strategic programs and planning around those populations to help increase, to your point, FTEs enrollment. A lot of students stop out because sometimes, I know my personal institution, we lose 54%. Well, we were losing 54% of our students before the first day of class. 54%, we realized we lost. We didn't know why. They started an application, we didn't know why. So we had to go back and figure out why. Do some evaluation as to at what point did they stop out? Did we stop communicating with them at some point? Did we just say they applied and they're admitted? We gave them admission letters in February or March, and they didn't hear back from us again until August when it was time to register? Or did we start having small events throughout the process? Did we start to build a sense of community for those students throughout the process? So it's not that summer melt that we all hear about. Now they feel as though, wow, MATC is somewhere I want to be because I have friends there, I have colleagues there. They showed me my picture, my future, and a plan to get there. So a lot of different techniques, but the key is communication. The key is really the process map and figure out where your gaps are. And then you have to look at the data. I look at enrollment data on a daily basis. Every day I can say exactly what we're missing, where we are, who we are in each group, and I can have an understanding for that. I present to our board monthly about enrollment. Every month, I present to the board of directors, they ask those questions. And we have to justify why we're having those challenges. And what can we do to improve it? So.
Thank you. I have a second question. Students often report that our admissions process is difficult and complicated.
Yes.
What experience do you have in streamlining the admissions process?
Same, very similar. It seems like on MATC. We had the same challenges. We still have some of those challenges. And so what we found is, again, you have to figure out why is it difficult, so you go to the students at times. When you think about our population and who we serve as a institution and how we deliver our services, it's important. I say that because it's hard to just increase more admission specialists, more bodies, okay? But we can increase capacity by doing things, by utilizing technology. We're using the Ivy chat box. We're going to implement that. We do text messaging with our students. We do direct connections with our high schools. We have adults, when we go to the students, we have go to the adult service areas. We go to the workforce boards to have those conversations. And we communicate. And so I don't know if you guys have a CRM and what the CRM is, but that CRM can help guide that. But if no one's monitoring it and no one's really using it in that way, you're going to have those gaps. And so we've improved significantly in our conversion at my current institution. We have a long way to go, right? And we're going to still continue to move there. But conversion is key. If you don't know it, the baseline, what your conversion rate is, it's hard to improve it. And so it has to be a point where everyone's looking at it on a regular basis and it becomes part of what we do, the fabric of what we do. Part of my individual goals is conversion. And so therefore accountability happens there, right? My president holds me accountable to conversion because I have to look at it and understand it. That matters.
Okay, we have two more questions from Heathrow.
Heathrow is on it.
Heathrow's on it. One is, you've talked about partnerships. What is your philosophy about partnering with smaller programs, vocational, things like that, that would benefit businesses and community, particularly for students that don't have years to invest in education?
So those short-term training programs are necessary because, to that point, it goes back to career pathways. If you think about career pathways, it's all about stackable credentials. It's about that if I don't have a full 2 years or 4 years, I can receive a credential of economic value at this point, and if I stop out, I still can receive some type of job. And I think that's important. So you have to first identify the need. What we have is a middle skilled labor gap. We know that. It's been well documented. So how do we work with our business partners to deliver instruction, maybe on their sites? We've done some of that at my current institution. We've had their individual workers serve as adjunct faculty members to build some tie-in there. We're looking at delivering our instruction differently because a lot of our students are, as I mentioned, shift workers. And so basically their shift is 4 weeks. You know what your schedule is, and 4 more weeks it may change. That's just the nature of the student we're serving as an open access institution. So how do we partner with our business partners to maybe improve some of that? Have conversations around that. There's not an easy answer, but there's a need there. And so identifying a need and having conversations with our advisory boards on how we can deliver our instruction in a way to meet their needs of our students, and then showing the value that if you receive this CNA, it gets you employable, then we're going to support you as you move to your RN. That's important.
We're going to have one here, and then I'll do
Okay.
second one for you, Drew.
Hi, I'm Tracy Harbin. I teach political science here. I'd like to hear a little bit more about working with faculty and getting them involved, specifically and maybe a little self-interested.
Okay.
I've led some short-term study abroad programs, and our Center for Global Engagement, they've been offering more and more. One challenge that we've had, though, is recruiting students to do it. You know, they rely on faculty since we do have access to students, but we only have a small percentage. So whether we're talking about short-term study abroad or other high-impact practices, how would you envision student affairs working to give these students opportunities, which we know then will help with retention and whatnot?
Good question. I think it starts with the student having an understanding what the opportunity really is. A lot of the students that we encounter at, especially our demographic population, they don't really see the benefit of studying abroad or what it really means to them in their career. They look at the financial implications a lot of times. That's always a barrier for some students. So do we have some type of grant funding program that we can work with the foundation to build that experience? Co-curricular programming is critical. We just went through HLC accreditation at my current institution, and co-curricular assessment came up time and time again. And I'm sure SACS is going to be looking into that more and more and more. How do you extend learning beyond the classroom? It has to be contextualized to a way that they see a benefit for that. And if they see a benefit for it, I'm more apt to do it. It's unfortunate, I don't want to feel as if you have to throw a bone or a carrot out there to the student, but in some ways we do. It's educating them to how this will help them ultimately in their career and as they move forward. And so it starts with small successes. Maybe there's a living learning community, some type of learning community that you can develop. Maybe there's a community service project that you can do within your program. Maybe there's some way you can partner with another faculty member that has some type of joint project. One example would be currently our healthcare faculty. They're working with our funeral services faculty as well as our event planning faculty and our marketing faculty. And they're working on a video that talks about how they are all interrelated. And so they talk about how if there's an injury from a nursing standpoint and there's a death, how it impacts the funeral area aspect from a funeral service aspect, then how the event planning aspect looks at it, okay? And then how do we market that? They're all working together to figure out, because it's one college. And so if they can see a seamless connection, okay, to different programs and how this really relates to my ultimate career goal, they're more apt to do it. So, and then find a way when that happens to assess it and getting their voice to let them tell you how it really works or what can we do differently is important. A lot of times we put things out there because we think we know and students want this, here you go. But then when we assess it, they're asking for something a little bit different. So once we tweak it and make small assessments and changes in it, we really meet their ultimate need. So I don't know if you guys have done any type of assessment, any type of evaluation on why or why not they're getting engaged, but that's a good place to start.
Okay, here's the question from Heathrow. Could you identify a few ways that you provide a student-centered approach to student services, and then how do you measure those service outcomes?
Okay. Understanding the needs of the student I will start there. And so there are a couple different things we can do. One example would be our Promise program, which I talked about. It covers tuition, but it doesn't cover books. And so what we know as higher ed professionals, our students have challenges in terms of books. So how do we work with our faculty? We're having conversations now in work groups around open sourcing, open educational resources. We're having conversation with our business partners about scholarships and funding around books and tools of the trade to assist those students there to make sure that they have both what they need. The holistic need of the student is not, to that point, always academic. So when you add in the fact that our students have housing, food insecurity, healthcare issues, how do we communicate that out? So I will give 3 different things we've implemented under my tenure related to those things. The first one is housing. We realize that housing is always a major challenge for our students, especially those, there are some programs that we only have in our state. We're 38,000 students. We're the largest community college in the state of Wisconsin. There are some programs that we only have, no one else has. So therefore, funeral services, we're the only funeral service provider in the state of Wisconsin. Therefore, when students come from Eau Claire or from Green Bay to Milwaukee, which is new for them, they have housing concerns. And so what we've done is we partnered with some of our community housing partners in the area, some of the apartment complexes, to get batch rate pricing for our students, and there's dedicated for us. And so on average, it's about $150 to $200 less a month for our students. And we work with our student life department, our SGA, to provide some support and some guarantees around that so that the students feel as though, okay, wow, I know I have somewhere to stay if I come there. But what we want to do is not just have that benefit for the department provider and the student. We realize there are students also that have other challenges. So in that contract, we built the need to have 4 transitional beds. Those 4 transitional beds are 2-bedroom units wherein students can stay there for 30 days rent-free. They go through an application process. Once it's approved through our student life team, they apply. We get them in there for 30 days rent-free. And while they're in there those 30 days, we're working with our housing providers, Milwaukee Public Housing, throughout the city to see if we can get them more long-term housing. That's been very successful. We haven't had to market it. We haven't had to market that approach because students had the need. We just didn't know it, right? We didn't identify it. It was always on the back end. I'm homeless now, I need help. Now we're putting it out there early on. They're communicating about that. We also realized, being in Wisconsin, the winters are long, and we realized a lot of our students, they would have healthcare challenges, and they didn't have healthcare. And so we partnered with our Freighter, which is the largest healthcare provider in the city, and we have now free walk-in clinics services for all of our students. That's happened in the last year and a half through conversations around, and how is it supported? Our student funds help support that. And so we went to the student SGA board. They used the ANS fees to provide some support there. We thought a creative way. Freighter gave us a nice one-time amount. And so now what happens is students can go get free walk-in services, free flu shots for themselves, okay, which goes directly to retention because now they're not missing as much classes. Okay, we had a 10% decline in students missing class based on what they said for health reasons because of that. Or maybe not, but I'm linking it to that, right? But we're trying to find a way to tie it to that so as we assess it. And so you have to look at that. Food insecurity. I have conversations now with our culinary department. We have a lot of food waste. We have a couple of restaurants on campus that they run. And so I just had an email for them 2 days ago, and we're gonna meet when I get back about what can we do. Is there a way, staying within the health guidelines, that we can use that excess food to meet the needs of our students? We don't want to just always provide bags. Students, here you go, here's a bag, here's a need. Sometimes we can just invite them to a luncheon. Okay, we can just support them in that way. Our student life teams have $5 food cards that they provide now. If a student has a need, if a faculty member identifies a student with a need, that student can come to Student Life, get a $5 food card, and they can go to our cafeteria and use that towards that. Okay, very important. And the last thing around that would be our students now can receive meal plans. And so we build it into our cost of attendance, and so therefore they can allocate a portion of their fees for financial aid to have a card for meal plans. So they can go and use that card to have meal plans, food, while they're on campus. And since it's tied to financial aid, we can do that early on, before the semester even starts, once the semester starts, before they receive that net check, because it's just applied to their student account. So a lot of things we can do differently, just thinking outside the box and being creative, but it's all about meeting the student need. So that's a couple examples of that.
Sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much for being here.
No problem, thank you.
My name is Mauricio Garcia, Assistant Director for Student Life.
Yes.
I would like to know if you can expand a little bit more on your experience you've had in the value of student life, student activities, and what are your plans, what are some of the ideas you have moving forward if you're selected as the candidate for the position?
A lot of experience in student life, worked in a couple of different areas, supervised it in several areas. But I want to go to your last question about what's my plans, and I shared this with the cabinet earlier. I think it's our plans, right? I can come in with an idea, but I think it has to be bottom up. It has to be driven from the team. You know your students better than I do. You understand their needs, their desires. We want to increase programming. We want to increase connectivity to the college, but how we do that may vary based on campus. Every campus, typically, we have 4 campuses at my current institution and 2 centers. They all have their own individual identity. So how we engage those students may be different based on each individual campus. So my vision will be something that we have to develop collectively with the team. It's not one thing. Do I have ideas? Yes, we've done Wind Down Wednesdays. We've done tons of different activities to get students engaged. We've had different clubs and organizations. We have multicultural, we have veterans. We do PT for our vets, for instance, to get them involved. But again, I think it would have to, I don't know enough about your student population at each individual campus to really set a vision for it. But whatever it is, it's going to be about getting them engaged and connected. And we will help to build that together as to what they're, and I say you have to ask the student, okay? It can't be only 8 to 6 every day, because our students are not just 8 to 6. A large portion of our students come in the evenings, okay? On average, our students take about 2 classes. So how do we engage them in a different way and think about it differently to meet their ultimate need? So I have ideas, which we can talk more, but I would rather help that built together collectively, because that's how we garner buy-in. It's not a push-down approach, it's a bottom-up approach to that, and it comes from us all working together to build that out.
Okay.
I know maybe I didn't give you the exact number, but there's ideas, but I think really I really would like to say, as a team, we have to build that, and that's the key.
Okay, hi, my name is Lisa Guian-Dolby. I'm
Hello,
representing
Lisa.
the Career Development Center.
Yes.
And so mine will be a little bit more related to that.
Okay.
In that we have the experience of working with students who are still in the decision-making process, so we help them with exploration of major and career paths. We also help students with gaining experience through job shadows and internships. And then, of course, direct employment,
Yes.
whether while they're in school or even after they graduate. And so because the dynamics of our department is so varying in that we work with community partners, namely our employers, that want to hire our students, I just wanted to know the 4 pillars: learning on the path,
Getting on the path.
Getting on the
Yeah.
path. What are some of the experiences that you've had with integrating some of those community employer partners and using the Career Center?
So when you talk about getting on the path, it starts with students having a clear understanding of what their path really is. And so that means career assessment, career understanding goes on the front end. Whether it's some type of non-cognitive assessment that you get an idea of what their needs are, whether there's a career tool that's a couple of questions at the application phase, whether there's a meeting in a student success class to identify what their needs are. So it starts there. The next step would be, as you talk about staying on the path, now I need to get connected. And I'm gonna walk a little closer, so that we're connected to the individual students and keeping them sticky. That's where our employer partners come in. Whether there's apprenticeships programs that we work with to develop, whether they're internship programs. We've done some stuff with our dual enrollment partners, wherein those students have a type of experiential experience while they're in high school. So they really see, I'm thinking Master Lock and Harley Davidson, for instance. We built where our students that want to go into machining, they start in high school, but they spend 6 weeks during the summer doing that work. It links them to an employer, but it also links us, and then it allows the employer to rebuild their workforce as well. And so those are a couple things we've done differently. I would say, I don't know how involved the advisory committees are, or you guys are involved with the advisory committees to really figure out what they're asking for. A lot of times what I've found in my experience is that they want the employee, but they're having challenges with the soft skills. A lot of our students graduate with the technical skill, but the soft skills a challenge. So having a way to embed that also into the course, into the class in some ways is a benefit for the student, not only in student success. And so we have what we call career essentials that are embedded into a lot of our first year gateway courses that we talk about time, time management, things of that nature. So a couple of different things around that. Sure.
Hello, I'm Janine McComas, and I'm a Student Success Specialist in Student Services.
Hi.
On our campuses, we do the process a little differently in that we have a one-stop shop.
Yes.
So students come to us to have their admissions questions answered, their records questions, and their financial aid questions all in the same place. Are you familiar with that type of structure, and how do you feel about that?
Yes, I am. At City College of Chicago, we had a one-stop shop. We implemented that shortly during my tenure there, but it was a little different. It was one stop, means we can get your initial questions answered, but there were referrals. And so what we did is we had our frontline teams identify what we call quick service options, quick service solutions that they can handle quickly with that student. And then anything that needs to be escalated, it escalated to a financial aid advisor, an advisor, a career advisor. So the one stop was like, I hate to say use the word triage center, but in one way it was that. It was that you come in, you get because a lot of times our students just want to turn in a document. Okay, there's some way, so there's different ways to do it, but I think it starts there. We have the Welcome Center at my current institution. And our Welcome Center, again, is that one-stop shop where students can get all their answers there answered, or they can be referred to the proper resource. And so it's a little different sometimes at the regional campuses because they're a little smaller. So what we find is they do a lot more of the work at the front line there because the staff is not as big as our downtown campus. And so just how do you cross-train to make sure everyone has the information, but we want to cross-train and know when not to give too much, right? Because that can cause problems as well. So there has to be a point where we say, okay, this is something that needs to be referred to a financial aid specialist because they have a little more knowledge on that than we do. And how do we build capacity to that? And we're using, like I said, we're implementing the Ivy chatbot to kind of help with some of that basic triaging of those questions. So.
Another question right there. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Andrea Velez, and I'm the Assistant Director of Advising and Counseling.
Okay.
And can you please share some of your ideas or experiences on providing appropriate resources to further enhance students' onboarding process while considering budgetary constraints?
There's a theme here, huh? Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, technology can assist with that. When you talk about advising, our advising ratio is close to like it's over 900 to 1 currently. We have a desire to get down to about 400 to 500 to 1. But we can't just hire another 50 advisors. So how do we get there? We have to find a way to utilize the skill sets of a lot of our individuals, our teams, our faculty, to support. Also, the technology helps. Again, if you can have a predictive analytics tool to identify what the student needs are earlier, you can have more outreach early on so that there's an understanding. We're moving to self-service with our Illusion tool that allows our students to do a little more independent thinking. So how does that relate to the functional areas of student services? Traditionally, student services has been really transactional. And so what we do is we see the student, we say we advise, but we more so schedule. We help them with the scheduling process. Advising allows us to really have that in-depth conversation. So I'm not sure what your advising model is. Appreciative advising, what do you guys use? Intrusive? Holistic advising, okay. And so is it faculty, staff, program? Is it a blend? Okay. So they're case management, case model, okay. Caseload model, basically. And so understanding that need and how you support those advisors through that process will be key. So asking for additional resources, I would say you have to first state the case. And so like we use Who's Next. That's one of the tools we use currently. Who's Next allows us to really look at the cues and see who's there and to track it. Now I have the data to state the case of the need. And then we ask our students, what do they need? Is it first-term advising? Is it long-term advising? Is it career advising? Can we have our faculty more engaged in the process? And so that requires training. That requires us having conversations during faculty development day about how we can advise and support those students as well. Then you have to have the counseling piece. I've had a couple conversations with counselors today. That matters as well. So how do you support that? As we see at all open access schools, mental health issues are rising. And so how do you support that as well? Well, we're partnering with our university partners to bring in more interns and to have them under a licensed PSPC, LPC, to support them. And so there's not one approach, there's a multitude of approaches, but I think you have to really figure out, okay, what's our goal? Is our goal here really to increase advising touch points, or is our goal really to give students the outcomes that they need to be able to, reach their ultimate goal of a career or transferring? That's where you develop SLOs for advising, SLOs for financial aid. Developing those student learning outcomes allows those individual students to know in the department to say, okay, I can get to the same outcome, but in a different way. And I think it starts there. Okay.
I have the mic. Who wants it?
And I'll mention one more thing, and that's something we just recently did. That's something that's totally new for the college, to go to SLOs for student services units, program review for student services units. And so we're on a 2-year program review cycle for student services units. We did that at City Colleges. We're adding it at MATC. Again, that's continuous quality improvement, and that's how you get better. And so how you advise at Heathrow may be a little different than how you advise at Sanford Lake Mary, but you have the same outcomes that's universal. And so how we get there may be different.
You can always count on a political scientist to talk. So I would like to hear more about utilizing the faculty, because in Faculty Center we have talked about the willingness of faculty to serve as advisors, although it's tricky because we recognize the great work that our current advisors do, and we don't want to trample on their ground. It's also tricky because we have a bargaining unit, and so we have to be mindful of the hours. Are they service hours? Are they release time? And so there's a lot of kind of issues around. So I guess it'd be great to hear an outsider's perspective on how do you fold the faculty who are willing to be part of this holistic model into the model.
Good question, and that's always a delicate balance there, especially when you're in a bargaining environment, which we currently have in my institution as well. And so what we've learned to do is to really provide the resources that the faculty need to support that student. Having the faculty understand the program plans and what they are, how to read them, how to support them. As advising team professionals, we see the student pretty much a couple times a year. Right, we see them a couple times. As a faculty member, you're typically seeing that student almost daily. And so how do you still support that student in a way? I believe in a blended model. And so you have professional advisors and you have faculty advisors, because typically the faculty advisors are more connected to the industry or the transfer than sometimes the professional advisors are, because they kind of deal with it on a day-to-day basis with those business partners. So blending the two, I think, will be key. Providing resources to support that, I think the faculty model will be key, but professional advisors is important, because professional advisors, they really help those students understand, navigate everything that they're involved in. So one thing we're doing, we're moving our faculty advising more so to the end of their terms, so that when they're really ready to transition to work or transition to the 4-year, it transitions to the faculty advisor more. There's a handoff there. But for the first 30 to 45 credit hours, they're with professional advisors that are helping those students on board. Because also a byproduct of this is our students change majors a lot. I have students with up to 15, 16 different degree changes. And so having a faculty member start early on, and now they're advising the student in culinary, and now the students in business or machining, you're just moving that student back and forth. So really giving that student the career on the front end, understanding what their needs are, advising them to that, and then when you feel as though they moved along a place in their academic journey, that they're here and they're ready to transition to the workplace or to the 4-year, the faculty communication begins a little stronger there. Yes.
How you doing? My
Hello.
name is Alvin Mitchell. I'm the Assistant Director for Adult Education here at the Sanford Lake Mary campus. And we have the unique situation where we have an adult education component to our institution. We try to look at the needs of the community The institution has its own set of directives and direction that it wants to go, and then we have an entire population of adult education students who have varied aspirations and goals. How do we balance our commitment to the community as well as addressing the direction that the institution wants to go, and try to enhance and encourage those students who are engaged in our GED, adult high school, and even ESOL programs to now make Seminole State their next stop in terms of their education?
So, good question. They're all our students, and that's really my view of it. I've worked in adult education programs. We currently have a comprehensive model as well at my current institution. We have adult education, we have adult high school, we have community-based organizations that partner with us to deliver adult education in the community as well. And so connecting that student to the college early matters. I gave an example that one thing we did at Tallahassee Community College is that we partnered with our student success course faculty and department to make sure to build a program where students could take, I would say, the concepts or the learning outcomes of a student success class, and we embedded them into the adult education curriculum in some way. And when those students were ready to transition, they created a portfolio. That portfolio was then transitioned to the student success faculty that will review that portfolio, and upon transitioning to the 2-year institution at TCC, the student received that 3 credits for that class. Benefit for the student and the institution. Because now you have a student that's transitioning, they know a little bit about how to do college because they've experienced that. You've done some student success training embedded in the process, and now they're connected. There's a benefit for me to move now to this program in this class. Because adult education, typically the cost, I don't know how your cost is regulated here, is a little cheaper. And so if they can move to the 4-year with 3 credits in student success and an understanding, there's a benefit for the student as well. But there's also a benefit to the institution because now you have a student that's enrolled and you're receiving tuition dollars and everything else that's tied to that. So, and we actually received a Florida Best Practice Award for that, from the Florida Career Pathways Network, for that articulation we did with our, at Tallahassee Community College.
Okay, we have about 4 minutes, so we can probably handle one more question. Who wants to go last?
You guys are quiet over here.
Yeah. Okay, all right, there we go. You get to be last.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Alex Lambus. I'm the Student Life Coordinator at Heathrow.
Okay.
And I was wondering, what has been the biggest challenge you've overcome in your career?
I would say understanding as you grow as a leader that the passion I have for student services and student success is not always the passion everyone else feels. And so how do we build that as a common driver? I feel as though I have a moral imperative to do what I do. While in law school at Florida State, I created these 3 terms that kind of guide me. Look back, reach back, give back. Look back from where you came because you didn't get here by yourself. Reach back to bring others with you, and when they come with you, teach them the importance of giving back as well. And those 3 things have driven me. But again, everybody else has different drivers. And so my passion for student success may be different from someone else's, but if we can come to a common ground and we can find out that there's a common issue that we're trying to work towards and move that forward, I think we can all be successful. So learning that we can get to the same place and we just have to get there differently is important. And that's something I learned. That's not something I came in with. I wasn't traditional academic. I was a business. I did sales and marketing, and I did a whole lot of other stuff. So in that area, you're driven to results. You're using the data to drive it, and it's the outcomes and outcomes, outcomes, outcomes. I had to pull back as I grew as a leader and say, okay, outcomes for some, it's just a transaction. These are individuals. These are students. These are lives. And so education changes that. So going beyond just an FTE, we talk a lot about FTE. We would say there are institutions that we say, okay, you lose, like for instance, let's use my current institution. We, 2 years ago, had an 11% completion rate. 11% completion rate. For me, it was we lose 9 out of 10. For some, it's 11%. It's totally different when you look at that we're losing 9 out of 10. And so how do you communicate that? How do you find a way to articulate the meaning of that in different ways to really meet the overall goal of the institution. So I'm still learning that, right? I'm still learning. I'm still trying to drive it, but it starts there. You have to have the voice of everybody at the table. You have to have the voice of the front line because they see the students on a day-to-day basis. You have to have the voice of your executive board and your president because they drive some of those strategies that the college is looking to implement. But you have to have the student voice. You have to look at the data, look at what they tell us. They're telling us some things, right? They're telling us where we have challenges. They're telling us that on average they may see an advisor once a year. What can we do to kind of improve that? They'll tell us that they take on average 2 classes a semester maybe. What can we do to improve that? They'll tell us as an AS student that it takes on average 11 semesters to complete. That's 5 years for some students to complete an AS degree. Okay, what's our imperative, our moral imperative as individuals, as higher ed professionals, to help those students get to where they want to go? Equity is more than just inviting students to the dance. Equity is making sure the music is played that everybody can dance on the floor. And that's important.
Thank you. Can we thank Mr. Craig?
Thank you, guys.
I'm going to sound like a broken record. Reminder, you have the evaluations at your seat. Brittany is at the door. She is not going to let you leave.
She's been my shadow all day.
And Maggie are at the doors at Heathrow, Altamont, and the Lee campus. Those of you that watch this live streamed and you weren't in a room, please go to the online link and fill out the evaluations within 15 minutes so that IER can summarize it and get it to Dr. Lorenz. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great day.
Thanks for your time. Thank you. Thank you.